Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kat Martins, and I am DWDC's Program Specialist. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues Amanda Coventry-Barrage and Kelsey Goforth. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather here today is the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. These nations continue to experience ongoing colonization and displacement. Today, Toronto is covered under Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaties. Dying with Dignity Canada is also mindful of broken treaties that occurred across Turtle Island and recognize our responsibilities as treaty people to engage in a continuous process of truth and reconciliation with all peoples across this land. I'm thrilled to welcome you today. Through our webinars, we aim to provide you with information and key takeaways, as well as create a space for conversation on end-of-life topics alongside the professionals that know it best. So before I welcome today's speakers, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Everyone on the call today is muted. However, there will be opportunities to submit your questions. To do so, please type your questions into the question bar that you see here on the Zoom side panel, and we will read it out for you at the very end. Please try to keep your questions as concise and clear as possible. Of course, while we're going to try to get to as many audience questions as possible today, unfortunately, we may not get to everybody. If you have any outstanding questions or questions that are personal in nature, please email us at support@dyingwithdignity.ca. Again, that's support@dyingwithdignity.ca, and we will follow up. This session is going to be recorded, so there's no need to take notes. There will be a post-webinar survey that will pop up on your screen after the webinar, and we will give the opportunity to share your feedback with us. We are also accepting registration for an upcoming series of our Death Dialogues program, so please enter your information in the post-webinar survey if you are interested. And now to introduce today's speakers. Robin Farr is the Program Manager for MAID Family Support Society, as well as a board member and volunteer peer supporter. She got involved with the organization after her dad chose a medically assisted death in 2021, and she's passionate about ensuring there is proper support for family members and loved ones that are choosing MAID. Signy Novak is the founder and director of MAID Family Support Society. In 2018, her father received MAID, and this was the most profound experience of her life. During this process, she realized there was minimal support available for family and friends supporting someone in the MAID journey, which inspired her to start MAID Family Support Society. She credits the ongoing success of the organization to the valued community of volunteers and partners who have been committed to its growth since 2021. Thank you so much to our speakers for joining us today. And for today's session, we'll be hosting a mixed format. So Robin and Sig have very kindly put together a presentation for today's session, after which we'll also conduct a short interview. So Robin and Sig, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. We are going to share a quick presentation that will give you a bit of a sense of the organization and what we do and why we do that. And then, as they said, we are going to go through some questions. So if you have questions, we're happy to answer anything that you have. Just a little bit for context. So when MAID became legal in Canada, the process started getting underway to get the medical system set up, the approvals, the eligibility criteria, all of that done. The piece that doesn't tend to happen within that system is the support for family and friends and loved ones who are accompanying someone through this journey. And that's essentially where we came in. So we started this program as a result of our own personal experiences. Sig, you're the founder. Do you want to go ahead and share a little bit about your experience and why you decided to get MAID Family Support Society going?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Robin. And thank you, Kat. Kat had just mentioned that my dad was diagnosed. He had cancer, basically had bowel cancer, and he died. He was diagnosed in 2014 and he died in 2018. I realized during the process of supporting him, near the end, it was, more in 2018 that he started talking about MAID. He was a physician and he was very very much in support of MAID. And so, you know, in supporting him, it was more closer to July in 2018 that we started to really have more conversations around it. And I realized during the process of supporting him in his decision that there was essentially no support for family members. I remember on the day that he was going to use MAID, my sister just casually mentioned to me, wouldn't it be, you know, helpful to be able to call someone right now? And that got me thinking. In the moment, I kind of said, yeah, but then afterwards, it got me thinking, you know, wow, you know, she really said something that was quite profound, actually. Like, wouldn't it be? And does that exist? In addition to this, my dad's final words were to the physician, and that was to keep doing the great work you're doing with MAID. And then he fell asleep. Now, over the course of 2018, he died in July. From then on, from 2018 to 2022, I started doing research across Canada, only to find that there were essentially no supports available. Other than within a MAID coordination team and the social worker, the physician, the NP, of course, but really they were maxed as well. And so I thought to myself, why not start something? So I launched MAID Family Support Society in 2021. At that point, I think we had 4 volunteers. And now we will get to telling you a little bit more about our organization, but now we have more than 60 volunteers involved. And this has truly been a labor of love for my dad. I'm here because he died. He got diagnosed with cancer. So that's how we began.
Thank you, Sig. My situation was similar in some ways. My dad had interstitial lung disease, and he chose MAID in 2021. And he had talked about it for a few months before that. He died in May. He brought it up probably the November prior and said he was considering using this. And all of us in my family were supportive of that, but we thought it was a little ways down the road. He brought it up a couple of times, just sort of checking in, making sure we were still supportive. And what ended up happening was that in, I guess, mid to late May in 2021, I got a phone call from my brother one Thursday afternoon, and he said, Dad has decided to go ahead with MAID next Thursday. So we had a week's notice. So that incited a bit of panic among all of us because we hadn't anticipated it coming quite that quickly. And I did a quick Google search for support because I'm the sort of person who likes to know what to expect, and I had no idea. I didn't find a whole lot in terms of the type of support that I was looking for, or even really the answers to some of the questions that I had. And given that we had a week, I decided I wasn't going to spend my time on Google. We were going to spend the time with my dad, so I sort of put that to the side, and we went forward spending that last time with him. And then after he died, we had received a pamphlet from the doctor. And on that pamphlet, there was a reference to Bridge C14, who's one of our partner organizations. And they had a Facebook group, they still do, with people who have had someone go through MAID. So I popped onto that. I found some other stories of people who had gone through this, and that immediately made me feel better. It was all of a sudden that feeling of being a little bit less alone. And I decided that I needed to start figuring out how to help fill that gap. And through a series of events that I actually can't even recall anymore, I think through a link from that group and some information that they shared, I ultimately found my way to Sig. And she had just started the organization at that time, and I got in touch and I said, I would like to help you out. And she said, your dad has just died. Don't you want a little bit more time? And I said, no, I really don't. I need to do something about this. And so I started off as a peer supporter in about August of 2021. And the following spring, she asked if there was anybody that could help with some things behind the scenes. And I said yes to that as well. And now she's stuck with me. So it's been, I guess we're coming on 3 years now. She and I work really well together. We've done a lot with this organization, and it's been an absolute pleasure. It has helped me in my grief, but it has also really given me some amazing bonds with some of the people in the organization. So let's tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. Sig, do you have a comment?
Oh, no, I don't know why I did that.
You're
Oh, gee.
clapping, or are you just raising your hand? Okay,
No,
I'll
I'm
go into this.
clapping
So
again.
we are MAID Family Support Society. We started off being called Bridge for You. So if you ever heard of that organization, we rebranded last year. We are now MAID Family Support Society. We started in 2021, as we said. And the goal that we have is to provide compassionate lived experience support to people who have someone going through MAID. We have, as we said, we had a whole bunch of people who have come on board to provide that peer support. We have all of these volunteers have lived experience with MAID. So everybody who is on our peer support team has had someone go through MAID. They have supported them through that process. They have lived it themselves and are now here to provide that support to others. So we offer peer-to-peer connection. So we are not counselors. We provide peer support, and we are looking for, we are here to provide support to anybody who has someone going through MAID. So that could be before, it could be after, it really depends when people find us. Most of the support that we provide is virtual. We are all across Canada. So mostly we provide support through phone, Zoom or video call, email and text. We occasionally have people meet up in person, but not terribly often. It really depends on logistics and if people are comfortable. We have support, as I said, before, during, and after MAID. And for some people, we walk with them through that whole process. We also share stories on our website, and we have a Facebook page, an Instagram account, and a LinkedIn account. And what we're seeing is that as MAID rises in Canada, so does the need for support. So to give you a little bit of context, in 2021, there were over 10,000 MAID provisions in Canada, which accounted for about 3.3% of all deaths. And that was an increase of just over 32% from 2020. Then in 2022, there were over 13,000 provisions, which was an increase of 31% over 2021. So people choosing MAID is increasing quite rapidly across the country. And what we're finding now is that there are then more and more people who are looking for that support as they go through that process with their family member or loved one. As we get people on board in terms of helping us, we want to make sure that we have support for our volunteers as well. We know people are coming into this with big hearts and a desire to support, and we also want to make sure that we are supporting them, as this can be a fairly heavy type of volunteer work to do. We do volunteer training when people come on. We have an onboarding process. We have monthly meetings with all of our volunteers. Every month, people can come onto a Zoom call and connect. We occasionally have guest speakers. We share support information and answer questions. And we've also started a volunteer drop-in group, a mid-month group for people who are new to the volunteer group and want to have an opportunity to connect and maybe ask some questions. We also have a debrief support process. We have 2 retired social workers who are available to debrief with volunteers. So we ask people to do that after their first couple of support calls, just to talk through that, make sure they're okay, have a look at whether anything was triggered for them. And then that group is also available for them to use at any time if they have a need to talk through something related to anything about their process or the supports that they're providing. We also have a circle of care, which is a group of our longer term volunteers who each have a group of volunteers that they support. So every volunteer in the organization has a circle of care lead that they can contact at any time, in addition to our debrief team or any of us on the leadership team. And we're just all here to make sure that people are doing okay, can get their questions answered, and can get support if they need it themselves as well. So since we started in 2021, we have now provided peer support to over 400 family members. As I said, either or both in some cases, before or after their MAID death in their family. We have more than 60 volunteers across Canada, and we are very grateful to have high ratings and good feedback from people who have received support from us based on the surveys that we send. It's really important for us to know if we are providing what people need, so we do ask those questions of people who have come through our program. We were very blessed to receive charitable status in 2023. And we, in addition to doing the peer support, we also are involved in a lot of efforts to provide MAID-specific support, to promote what we do, to promote what our partner organizations do, and work with those partner organizations to make sure that people who need any of the support that we provide know that we are out there. Our goal is really to make sure that people have support when they need it. One of the things that we find is that people often come to us through a web search. So they're Googling for support, and that is when they're finding us. And we would like to make sure that they're getting it earlier in the process, a little bit further up the chain, so that they're not having to go home and do that panicked Google search, but they actually have it in time when they are in the most need. To give you a sense of where people are coming to us from, this is our requests by location, so that you can see here we have a lot of people in BC and Ontario. Alberta is close behind. That does tend to relate to the incidents of MAID across the country. Those are happening more often in BC and Ontario, and we do see that coming through in terms of the support requests that we see. In terms of before or after MAID, we are generally seeing that people are coming to us before, although that is starting to shift a little bit. It used to be more that we were talking to people after their loved one's MAID death. And with the promotion and outreach that we've been doing, we're finding that people are seeing us a little bit earlier. They're finding us earlier in their process. And so they're now coming to us more often before MAID, and then continuing on in terms of maintaining that support through the MAID process and also afterwards as well. In terms of who is choosing MAID in these people's families, in many cases, it's often the parent. We have a number of people who have a spouse or a partner coming through as well. You can see the breakdown there. There's a self section of that pie chart. We don't provide support to people who are choosing MAID for themselves. That's not really in our wheelhouse. We do refer those out to our partner organizations. But you can see here that this is essentially the breakdown of who is choosing MAID and who they're coming to us looking for support. As I said, you can see that big blue block there is our web search stats. So in terms of referral sources, people are still most often finding us through a Google search. These are all 2023 numbers. So we are now looking at that blue block decreasing a little bit as people are finding us. More people now are finding us through their doctor or their MAID program, as well as through partners like Dying with Dignity and so on. We are very happy to be seeing that, because it means that people are finding support when they actually need it. Just seeing a question in the chat there. Do we offer bilingual services? We have, we actually just have one volunteer now who is coming on board, who is able to provide support in French. That's one of the things that we are looking for, is diversity of language and really any kind of diversity in terms of background, so that we can best support people who have specific needs, whether that's related to language or culture or anything else. So if that applies to you, we would love to hear from you as well. This is our Facebook audience in 2023. You can see that the audience skews a little bit older and primarily women. Probably doesn't surprise anybody too much. But we do have good engagement on Facebook. We share quite a lot of information about MAID in general and the support that we provided, as well as some information from our partners. So you can find us there, as well as we said before, LinkedIn and Instagram, which we have just started more recently. One of the things that we are very excited about is that we have published a book. One of our volunteers, in partnership with somebody else, decided that we needed to create additional avenues for support. And so they have put together a book called The Many Faces of MAID. This is 17 storytellers who have had somebody going through MAID with a loved one. And it goes through in a bit of a chronological approach. So it starts with the diagnosis and goes through the process of discovering MAID, saying goodbye, the actual day of MAID, and so on afterwards after that in terms of moving forward. This was published in September 2023. It's available on Amazon, and all proceeds go to our organization. So since September, in the last just over 6 months, I guess we've had over 1,000 books sold. So we're seeing really high demand for this. And you can see some of the excerpts from the reviews there in terms of what people are seeing as they are encountering this book. As I said before, our primary goal is to make sure that people have support when they need it, regardless of what that support looks like. Some people want a one-to-one conversation where they can talk to somebody who has gone through it. We have heard from people who aren't ready to do that. They're just not ready to have that conversation, but they're quite happy to read a book and have a look at what others' experiences were like and get a bit of perspective and support that way. So please have a look for that on Amazon. It costs $20, and you'll find some really good stories in there. I say that with a bias. I'm one of the storytellers, but having met and read the other stories, I can tell you there's a lot of really good stuff in this book. These are some links in terms of our connections. As I said, this is our website. We also have a quarterly newsletter that we send out. You can sign up for our newsletter there. And then these are our other partners, which you may very well be aware of as well. So if you do go to our website, you can find the Get Support request form, or you can refer people there. It's a quick form that we ask people to submit to let us know what they're looking for so that we can match them with volunteers. We also have a lot of stories of people who have gone through MAID. So that's another source of support, and people can get a sense of what that experience was like for many of us who have gone through this. And then you can also find a link to our volunteer application form there as well. So I saw one question in the chat there around being interested in volunteering. We love to hear that. Please reach out to us through our website. We will get back to you, and we will get you some information about the role and get you onboarded. So that is our presentation for today. Thank you very much for taking the time to let us share all of that with you. And we're happy to go through some questions now with you.
Thanks,
All
Robin.
right. Thank you so much, Robin, Sig, for sharing that. What an incredible organization. So as you mentioned, let's go ahead and get started with the interview. So I just want to touch on the last question that you had answered there, just about involvement. So since the focus of MFSS is on peer-to-peer support, can you share with us a little bit more about the peers who are providing the support to your clients? And if someone is interested in volunteering, what are sort of the general steps, or what's the process like to become a volunteer?
Sure. So as I said, all of our volunteers who provide peer support have been through MAID with somebody. So everybody has that lived experience. What we're finding is that most of the people who are choosing to volunteer didn't have the support that they needed. So that's why they're choosing to volunteer with us, to help fill that gap. So that's a big part of the motivation for many people. We have a lot of different people, ages, and experiences and so on, but everybody knows what it's like to go through that with somebody and is willing to share that with another person. We do have people volunteering with us who do not have lived experience with MAID, and they just want to support the process. So they do some of the things in terms of behind the scenes, whether that's fundraising or communications and so on. In terms of how to apply, we have a volunteer application on our website. As I said, it's a relatively short form. They just go through, they apply through the website, they let us know a little bit about themselves. And then we do 2 interviews with a vetting team, just to talk about why they want to volunteer, if they feel ready, what they feel might trigger them, just a bit of a conversation to make sure that they understand the role and they're ready to go into that. We also check a reference. So we ask people for essentially a character reference. And then if they are ready and willing and an appropriate person to volunteer with us, we put them through a bit of an onboarding process. So we share some information and context with them. We have some forms to fill out, all of that usual sort of stuff. And then we get them onboarded, and we get them connected with people on the team so that they can start having the context and the resources that they need as they get into providing that one-to-one peer support.
Wonderful. Thank you. Before I move on, I just wanted to check, Sig, if there was anything you wanted to add.
No, she covered it.
All right. Next question, and feel free, either of you, to jump in. Do you have any resources or coping strategies that you yourselves found helpful when supporting your loved ones through MAID, or while supporting others in these peer-to-peer sessions?
I can speak to that. Well, there's 2 questions going on there. For supporting others within the organization, Robin already mentioned a few of our partners. We do refer people to places like Bridge C14, for example, because they have drop-in groups, and that can be very helpful. And the other area are websites like Virtual Hospice. They offer some really good material with regards to grief, specifically My Grief and Medical Assistance in Dying. So we would share these resources with people we support, as well as sharing our own what worked for us. For me, You know, people talk about complicated grief with MAID, and I think about my own grief, and I've been doing a lot of that lately, just in preparation for this presentation. And you know, ours was relatively smooth, and I consider myself very fortunate that everybody was on board with my dad's decision. So I found my grief afterwards was quite smooth, although I missed him. And of course, the procedure itself can be, you know, it can be jarring. Like your person is there with you and you've had quite a lead up potentially, or the process has happened really fast. And then all of a sudden they're not there. So, you know, we really are sensitive to that. Talking with others is what I would say is the most helpful. But again, there's the social stigma around MAID. And so you're cautious about who you talk to because you don't know if they're going to accept this, you know. Maybe they have religious beliefs and that's going to come into play, or you just don't know. So what I would recommend is really finding a safe person, first of all. And secondly, if you don't want to talk to somebody, then using the Many Faces of MAID book for sure. And reaching out to us. That's a starting place where we can connect you with somebody with a similar loss, not exactly, of course, but if you went through with your spouse, or it was, you know, we try to match you in the area of Canada so that the time change isn't too much. We try to match you by diagnosis and also by your loss or your impending loss. So there's a few things, you know, and then there's other times where we recommend counseling or therapy because sometimes it's beyond us. We're not counselors. We're there to listen. We're there to explore what the struggle is and acknowledge it. And then we're there to also to explore resources and what would help. Sometimes we use more than one support person. To give you an example, we will do the initial support and maybe the volunteer realizes that this person needs something else. Maybe they have children and they're struggling with telling their children. Then we have a volunteer or volunteers that we would refer to as a second support for that person. Or maybe they have a spiritual conflict that they're struggling with. And so then we have somebody who's got a spiritual background. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. I just wanted to check, Robin, if you had anything else to add.
Nope, I think she covered it.
All right, thank you. So my next question is more about the MAID experience specifically. For the clients that have been supported by MFSS. So I'd like to ask, what are some of the common challenges that individuals experience while supporting a loved one through the MAID journey?
There can be so many. So for some people, even if they accept their person's decision, and most of the people that we talk to do accept that, it can be a hard thing to accept, a hard thing to process. Can be challenging to accept the timing. Of course, there are some people, and there are those that reach out to us in this situation as well that don't accept their person's choice, and they can have a really hard time coming to terms with that. But for many people who have someone choosing MAID, the biggest challenge is knowing the date and time of that person's death. It's like a big clock on the wall that's ticking down, and it can be really hard not to go through that mental countdown in your mind. So that can be really hard and very challenging for many. We hear that people want to make their loved one's time as meaningful as possible. And so they're trying to reconcile their own feelings while going through the logistical pieces of having somebody choosing MAID, going through the anticipatory grief that comes with this type of situation, and wanting to make sure that their loved one is as comfortable as possible, and that they have all of the things that they need. And as we all know, when people are very ill and dying, that can be a very challenging thing. So it's a lot to reconcile your own needs, your own feelings with that of the person that you're supporting as they make this very profound and brave decision, and as they move forward through that process. And that I would say are the biggest things that we see, is just that that knowledge in advance of knowing that this is coming, knowing exactly when it's coming, and trying to manage their feelings as they support their loved one through that process.
Absolutely. Sig, anything else to add?
No, that was well said.
All right. For the next question, what would you say to someone who's hesitant to seek support?
I would say that I understand, and that it's not easy to reach out and let someone know that you're maybe struggling, or you don't agree with what happened, or you fear rejection. I completely understand that. And there is like I mentioned, the social stigma, and that can make you hesitant to seek out support. It's difficult to know who would be open to having a conversation, as I said, but you're not alone. And we are out there. It's very difficult for many to speak about their experience. But and I said earlier about the resources that are out there, I already mentioned that. I don't know, Robin, is there anything else you can think of? Because we've mentioned a lot about this. If you hesitate to seek support, can you think of anything else?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I would agree with what you said. I think what I would add to that is we can start slow. If somebody's reaching out to us for support, we can start slow. It's up to them to guide what's needed.
Yes.
They may reach out and have an initial very short conversation and need some time to process, and then can get back in touch a little bit later. We have had people who have reached out for support, and they have said, "Ooh, actually, you know what? I'm not ready to do this. I can't do it even over email or text where I'm not having a live conversation with somebody." So they pause and then they come back when they're ready, and that's completely fine. For some people, they come and they have this conversation with us, and they just need to feel a little bit less alone and talk about it with somebody who has been through it. And many people come to us, they have one conversation with us and they say, "That's great, thanks, I'm good." And that's fine too. So there's a big range in terms of what support looks like for people. Some people know what they're looking for when they contact us. Many people do not. They just need somebody on the other end of that line. And some people have some support and they think they're fine. And then they still come back months or weeks later and say, "I need another conversation." And we say, "Great, that's what we're here for, no problem." And that's really the main thing, is that it's up to people to guide what's needed. That's why we let them choose the method of support. If email is easier, that's totally fine. They can respond when they're ready. The main thing that I would say is you don't have to do this alone. We've all been through this. We all understand to some degree what that person is going through, and we're here to listen and provide whatever support is needed.
All right, thank you both. For my next question, in your role, you speak with a lot of folks accompanying someone through MAID, and you're fellow volunteers as well. I'm curious if you know, what are some of the most common misconceptions you hear about MAID in Canada with these experiences with volunteers and with clients?
I think the biggest thing we hear is that the grief should be easier because you know in advance, and you know very specifically in advance, and that doesn't tend to be the case for most people. Grief is grief. It doesn't necessarily get made easier because you knew the date and time that was coming, or you knew how your loved one was going to die. The other thing I think is that, and we've heard a lot about this in the media as well, there's a lot of sort of conversation and noise about people choosing MAID because they don't have the social or medical support that they need. That has certainly not been our experience. I can't speak to this in the country in generally, or to other people's experiences, but in terms of the people that we talk to, people in their lives are choosing MAID because they don't want to suffer anymore, and they have the ability to choose not to. And so they have come through with the support that they need in the medical community, in terms of other types of social supports, the support of their family, and they are choosing this as a controllable and a dignified death. And that, I think, provides a lot of reassurance to a lot of people, that it just becomes something that is a choice that is available to people, and it's just the right thing for them. So that would be the two things, I think, is just in terms of the situation that people find themselves in, and as well just the grief and what to expect in terms of grief with this type of a death. It's just not necessarily any easier.
Mm.
Wonderful. Thank you. Before I move on, did you have anything that you wanted to add, Sig?
Yeah, no, I agree. Robin is said it very, very eloquently. I mean, I spoke earlier about, it being kind of a challenging grief for some. It's very different than a natural death or a sudden death. And so, yeah, it definitely can be challenging. Absolutely. Just the mere fact of witnessing death, right? You're witnessing a death. And who doesn't need to talk to somebody about that? You know, um, I sure wish it was available when I was going through, when I was putting this organization together, I didn't realize how great a need it would be. I knew there would be a need, but I had no idea how great it would be. So, yeah.
Absolutely. We touched on this a little bit in your previous answers, but for my next question, I'm just curious to see if anybody has anything further to add. In your experience, is the grief experience during and after a MAID death different than non-MAID deaths? And you touched on how witnessing death itself is a distinct experience. And I'm just wondering if anybody had anything further to share.
Mm.
I think I would just echo what Sig has said. It feels like in my experience with my dad, having lost other people in my life, this was a bit of a different process. It was a different feeling. We hear that from a lot of other people as well. The anticipatory death, that sort of expected, the grief that you go through in that period before somebody actually passes away is really challenging. Not that that doesn't exist with other types of death or illnesses for sure, but it is a significant element of a MAID death. For some people, even if they support the choice, it can be difficult to reconcile that somebody has chosen this, or perhaps reconcile the timing that they have chosen it for. That was a huge challenge for me in that sort of 6-day period, the last day of my dad's life. I think I saw enough of how he was coping to realize, no, he was ready. And that made it a little bit easier for me, but it still has been a process. We're coming up to 3 years in a couple of weeks, and I still think about that. And for a lot of people, just that processing of this choice can be challenging.
Mhm.
For a lot of people, there can be comfort that their person has a peaceful death. That's not the case for everybody in a MAID situation, unfortunately, but for many it is, and there can be some comfort associated with that. And as Sig had said before, there are people who are not comfortable talking about the fact that their loved one has chosen MAID, or in some cases, we've heard from people who their loved one has asked them not to share that they chose MAID and that's how they died. And that can make things really challenging as well. So in that scenario, that's a great place for us to come in. If people can't speak about that with people in their lives, they can talk to us confidentially about that, and then they don't have to bear that burden alone.
Mhm. And the other complicating factors, that make this grief more complex is if there's family disagreements leading up to it or after. If there's, as I said before, the spiritual or existential conflicts, of course, those come up a lot. Situational conflicts like a forced transfer or perceived negative judgments, as we've talked about, or like I said, just witnessing death. So there's a lot of factors that come into it, but many of us have had various experiences, and so we really feel we can relate on a lot of levels, and yeah, it's not an easy path.
Absolutely, but no less meaningful work, I would say. All right, thank you for that. For our last question here on grief, I'm just wondering if either of you have any further lessons learned on grief that you'd like to share. Perhaps something that's come up in your work that you didn't know before MFSS had started.
Mm. Robin, do you want to answer, or
Sure, I can
we've
take a
we've
stab at that
we've
one.
said a lot, but
Yeah. I don't know that this is necessarily something I didn't know. I don't know that I had heard the term anticipatory grief, or I hadn't connected it, and having language for that was really helpful for me. One of the things I think that has been reiterated for me through conversations with people is we have this sort of weird societal expectation that you should grieve for about a year and then you should be okay. And that's not how life works. That's not how grief works. grief comes in waves and can be triggered by unexpected things, and you know, we don't know what it is that's going to trigger that. I got triggered a couple of years ago by a toothpick on a ferry in BC. These things that just sort of come up because they, you know, you think that the person has died, they chose that. It was a peaceful death. You were there with them when they died. It should be a little bit easier. Your grief should be shorter, and that's not necessarily the case. It really doesn't tend to work that way. And you know, MAID is a situation for a lot of people where there may be additional anniversaries than with another death. There may be the date that they found out about it, the date that they decided that they would go ahead, or the date that they got approved, the date that you found out they were choosing to go ahead, the date they actually died. So these things can come up and can be a little bit triggering, where these things tend to happen in waves. And that can be a bit of something around MAID that I think is different, that I don't know that I anticipated for myself, that I discovered after, and that I had heard from other people, where you know, these things just sort of keep popping up in a bit of a row there, and all of a sudden things are overwhelming for a period of time because of all of the different you know, anniversaries and trigger points that come with it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So for my final question, you know, in the presentation, you mentioned that the demand has been tremendous for the kind of support that you offer. So I'd just like to take a moment to ask if there's any upcoming initiatives or projects that your organization is working on that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I can share. You know, we're still a baby organization, but right now we're trying to take it to the next level. And since we became a charitable organization, it's been very evident that you know, we are able to attract more donors now, and so that's one thing, is fundraising, you know, applying for grants. We're going to be focused on that, as well as continued outreach to hospices. That's a real big focus of ours right now. Expanding our volunteer orientation training, and we do hope to, with funding, we do hope to translate the Many Faces of MAID book into both audio format and French, and as well as translating our website into French. So this is where some of our funding is going to be going towards in the future. Do you have any other initiatives, Robin, that you can think of?
Yeah, one of the things that I'll share is our digital stories work that we're doing, that hopefully will be available to people. So we're working with a guy in Calgary called Mike Lang, who does digital stories. There's a group of our volunteers, I'm one of them, going through a workshop with him right now to create short digital stories, like little mini films about sort of 3 to 5 minutes long, about our experience with MAID. This is in connection with researchers through Lakehead University, but just that process of going through and putting those stories together has been actually a really lovely and profound experience. And we are in the final stages of that now. We'll be wrapping up those stories in the next probably couple of weeks, and then should have some of them available, and hopefully we'll be able to share some of those as well. So that will be another bit of insight into this experience for people who might not know what it's like, or who might be looking for you know, a bit of insight into what they can expect.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you both so much. So that concludes with the interview segment of today's webinar. We're going to move on to some audience Q&A. So thank you so much to everybody watching that submitted their questions in the registration, as well as throughout today's session. So we'll start out with this audience member who asks, and feel free either of you to jump in. What is your most memorable moment in your roles at MFSS? Does one story stick out more than another?
Stories supporting somebody, I can think of, and I can also think of a story that's with our volunteers, but a story supporting somebody where they asked me if I could do anything differently, if I could go back and I could change anything, what would it be? And it kind of threw me off. I thought, oh, I said to them, I need a moment, just a moment to think about what I would change, because I actually never thought about that before. And so the thought that popped into my head is that I wished we had have talked more about my dad's body after he died, and planning for that. We were so busy planning for the preparation and the actual procedure that it got lost in translation somehow. And so I said this to the person, and they were like, wow, like they were stopped dead in their tracks. They were about to do the MAID procedure like in the next few days. And they said she said we hadn't talked about that. And I was like, well, perfect. I'm so glad you asked the question. So then they were going to go and have the conversation. So that always comes up for me when I think about a good memory. But we've had so many amazing bits of feedback here and there to keep us going. So Robin, do you have anything?
I think the one that sticks out for me is I was supporting a woman, I'm in Calgary, supporting a woman who lived in Ontario, and it was her mother who had chosen MAID. And we had a number of conversations over Zoom. And I think it was our second conversation. She said, my mother is Polish, and she's sort of not a deeply embedded, but a peripheral member of the Catholic community. And somebody had let that community know that she had chosen this, and there was a bit of an uproar around that. There was not a lot of support for it. And the priest contacted them, and he said, could I come over and visit with you? And this woman said, I know he's going to come and try to talk my mother out of this, and I'm feeling like I need to step in and support, or, you know, or prevent him from coming in. I don't know how to manage it. And her mother said, just let him come. It's fine. And this is a woman who, I think she was 88. She was, you know, very close to her death, and very pragmatic about things. So the priest came in, and he did try to talk her out of it. And she said, my mother just sort of stoically sat there and talked to him and thanked him for coming and thanked him for his time, and then ushered him out. And she said, I was so worked up about this and what it was going to require of me. And she didn't need me at all. And it just reminded me that we bear so much of this burden, and we bring this on ourselves. And there are certainly cases where our loved ones need us to advocate for them, or they need us to step in. And there are cases where people who have made this decision are comfortable in their decision. They know that it's the right thing for them, and they will go forward no matter what, whether a priest comes in and tries to talk you out of it and tells you that it's a sin or not. And there's just so many stories like that of people who are just, have gone through this with their families, and they find strength they didn't know they had, and they have a moment to have a laugh, and that's really what I think this is about, is just those meaningful moments with our loved ones as they go towards this sort of final step that they have chosen.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing those stories. For our next question, an audience member asks, roughly how long does it take for your organization to contact a person that's seeking support from you after they make that initial application?
I would say within 24 hours max. They will hear from someone right away when they submit their form. They will get an automated email, but then they will hear from myself or someone else. If they've said that they're okay with texting, then they'll get a text probably within 8 hours. And then I'll say to them that we're searching for someone for them, and that we're here for you. We're here. If you have any further questions, just text me. And then we match accordingly. And then that volunteer will reach out within the next 24 hours. So they know that they're with somebody right away. It depends too, if the MAID death is imminent, then we will jump on that quickly. And I'll say to them, is this something that you need support around urgently, or can it wait like 24 or more hours? And they'll say, oh no, just contact me this week. And then I know. And so, yeah, that's how we do it. But yes, absolutely, 100% of the time, they will hear from somebody. There has been a glitch with our email once where we missed a few, but that was early on. And yeah, we've corrected that process.
That's incredible. That's an incredibly short turnaround time. So I tip my hat off to you guys and the program. For our next audience member, this person is sharing their personal experience. And they say here, my sister received MAID alone and chose not to have any family present. And this person's wondering if anybody has had an experience similar to this at MFSS now or in the past.
Robin, I can't think of anyone.
I don't know that we have any volunteers who specifically had that situation. I know of one person who was with her spouse when she died, but her spouse had chosen not to share that with anybody else. But I believe we've had a couple of people contact us who have been looking for support, who had a bit of a similar situation, or they were anticipating that. That's a really challenging situation, and it's heartbreaking, and my condolences on all kinds of levels to not be there. My dad was actually initially thinking he would do that, despite having told us and saying and having told him that we were supportive. He was originally planning to just go ahead and have the long-term care home that he was in just tell us that he had passed away. Luckily, he changed his mind, and I'm very grateful for that. So I can imagine a little bit how that must feel. Luckily, that didn't turn out to be the case for us. But I think with this type of a situation, the thing that I find with so many people is it's such a profound decision that there are all kinds of ways that people choose to handle that. And sometimes it's just, I've made this choice for myself. I don't want anyone else to have to go through this. I'm just going to go ahead. And that seems to be the path that some people choose to go. And I'm imagining that makes the grief that much harder. And I'm terribly sorry for that. I know that's a challenging situation.
And to add to that, Robin, we are looking for volunteers to address those types of situations, with those experiences. We want the people that have had the difficult situations. We want volunteers that have been through MAID with somebody with dementia. We have a few volunteers, but we're building that capacity, because as people grieve the person that's gone through with dementia, there'll be more people out there that would potentially want to volunteer. Right now, there's not many people because they're in that state of grief. But you know what? If you think you have a really unique situation and this could happen again to somebody else, then we would welcome you as a volunteer.
Absolutely. And just before we move on, I have a follow-up question here. I'm just curious, there are individuals that work in peer support groups that may not necessarily have lived experience, but, I'm curious as to why it's important for your organization that peer-to-peer support volunteers have that lived experience. Why is it crucial?
Mm.
That's a really good question. It's a decision that we've made along the way. We had a couple of people reach out to us about volunteering, and they didn't have lived experience. And we had the initial conversations and said, would you be interested and would you be comfortable having these conversations with people? And they said yes, they were very passionate about providing that support. And then when we got into what that looked like, we realized they probably can't have the right conversation. They can't answer the questions. The people that come to us, what they really need, we find that people are looking for one of two things generally. One is an ear just from somebody who has been there, somebody who understands what it's like. And the second thing is just to ask some questions. So if you haven't been through this with somebody, you can't provide either of those things. And that's really our value to people. That's what we are here to provide. And that's what we find people are looking for. So that's why we've made that decision. And it wasn't out of prejudice up front or a desire to exclude people. It was really through exploring that conversation and realizing, no, this is the service that we provide. This is what people need. And so that's one of the qualifications that we need people to have.
And to add, we are also open to a conversation around that. We're not closed on this. There are lots of people out there that have worked at hospice situations that have supported so many people. And so, you know what? We'll look at it. We'll look at it, because that might be a way of increasing our numbers. It would be. But we're not closed. I mean, we started in a certain way and we're growing, and, we want to take everybody's ideas in, and this might be one where we need to grow in. Like, do you want to speak to somebody who has actual lived experience, or are you okay with somebody who's worked at a hospice that has experience that way? So we're open.
Great. Thank you so much for indulging me. Next audience member question. This audience member asks, are you affiliated or partnered with the End of Life Doula Association to provide support? Have you ever worked with death doulas?
You want to go, Robin?
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah, we do work with some death doulas. We actually have a couple of people on our volunteer group that are death doulas. And we've had people inquire with us. We've had many of them reach out and just say, this is, I'm looking for information, or I'm here to support. So we definitely consider them part of our extended community, and we've had many conversations. We are working with Death Doulas International. We have a volunteer who is part of that organization. They've just launched a podcast, actually, and we are participating in a couple of episodes with them to share our stories there. So we've had connections with end-of-life doulas in a variety of ways, and certainly welcome contact with people from that organization or that community.
Great, thank you. Next audience member asks, what have your conversations been like with folks that, or rather, maybe I'll rephrase the question here. Have you ever encountered with your volunteers or with clients that you've personally supported anybody that's been supporting a loved one that's unfortunately been subjected to a forced transfer?
We do have a couple of volunteers who had that situation, and we have had a number of people come through looking for support who were in that situation. And I know Dying with Dignity has done a bunch of work around this lately and has been looking at that issue, which we're very grateful for, because we don't feel as though anybody should be in that situation. It's a very challenging thing when somebody is very ill and they're planning a death like this, to have that process in the way, and having to go through everything that's involved in finding somebody or finding somewhere else for this procedure to take place. So we have supported people in that situation. We do have a couple of volunteers who've been through that as well.
Hi, everyone. Amanda is having some tech difficulties, so I'm going to jump in for the last few minutes here. Sorry about that. We have a couple of follow-up questions just in regards to what you both were just talking about. People are asking what a forced transfer is. Would either of you be interested in speaking a little bit to what that experience is and sort of how it impacts people going through it?
Yeah, do you want to take that?
Yep.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, I don't know that I'm the expert in this area, so you'll have to, you can fill in. Forced transfers, this is a situation where somebody is in an environment, a hospice or a long-term care home or some type of a facility where they do not allow MAID to take place. So they do not permit MAID to happen in that facility. So if somebody has gone through the process of applying for and having been found eligible for MAID and they have opted to go through, that means that they need to find somewhere else for that to take place. So they need to be transported to another facility where MAID is permitted. They may go home to their own home if that is reasonable and feasible for them. But essentially means that before they can have that MAID provision take place, they need to be moved, is essentially what that comes down to. Usually for religious objections, often that happens in Catholic facilities and other facilities where they don't have a lot of support for MAID. And so therefore they do not permit it to happen on the property.
And ends up being in an environment that's not comfortable. So foreign to them very often.
Thank you so much for that. And another term that's used as well is institutional religious obstruction, which is kind of an umbrella that includes a forced transfer, which is the sort of physically being moved out of a facility to have MAID. But we also see situations where, you know, assessments aren't allowed on site, where sort of information isn't being provided and just the conversation isn't really being permitted on site. So if anybody is running into a situation like this, please do reach out to Dying with Dignity Canada, and we would certainly be interested to hear about what it is you're going through on that front. And I think, Sig, you're going to sign off about now. And Robin, I think we might have, I think I saw one more question come through. If you maybe wanted to take that one before we wrap up fully for the afternoon. But Sig, thank you so much for joining us today. And Robin, we'll keep you here for just a few more minutes to do these final questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sig.
Thanks, Robin.
Thank you. Talk to you later.
So I think I saw a question come through that was about sort of distinguishing between the work of MAID Family Support and what you're providing versus more like a counseling role. Can you speak to that a little bit and what the differences are?
Sure. So our role is peer support. And what that basically means is that we are people who have been through the situation that the other person is going through. So we are not professionals. We are not counselors or anything like that. We do have people in our organization who have that background, but we actually ask them to take that hat off and put on their peer support hat when they're doing this role. Because what we provide to people is just a listening ear, the understanding of what somebody is going through, and an ability to relate and empathize. There are people who come to us who need a little bit more support and who need they need counseling or therapy, and that's fine. Many of us have sought that elsewhere as well, but we are very clear that this is not what we provide. This is not our area of expertise. So when that is the case, we do refer people out and encourage them to find that extra professional support that they might need. But we really are here to provide that understanding of people who have been through what somebody else is going through, which for many people is something that they can't find through a counselor. They may be lucky to find somebody who has experienced MAID, but it's not so common that you can necessarily find that. So that's where we fill in a little bit of that gap of people who have actually been through it, and who can understand and relate and provide that type of support.
Great. Thank you so much for clarifying that. I think before we wrap up today, maybe a question we could end on is, with our audience here today and people who might be watching the recording later on, and given all the experience that you have supporting individuals and the team at MAID Family Support Society, supporting so many individuals across the country, is there anything that you would want people to know about MAID, about MAID grief in particular? Any sort of takeaways that you would like those who maybe are a little less familiar with what MAID is to take away from today's session?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. I think the thing with MAID is that it has been around in Canada for, I guess we're coming on 8 years, if I'm doing my math right. And it's becoming a little bit more common. When my dad chose MAID, I didn't know anybody else who had had somebody go through MAID. So I had nobody in my life that I could turn to and talk to. And that's still the case for a lot of people. It's becoming more and more common, as we said earlier. It's increasing, but it's still, we're still looking at a small percentages of death in Canada with people who are choosing MAID. So it can be really helpful to reach out and talk to somebody who has been through that, who can understand that. There's a lot of information out there about MAID. Obviously, Dying with Dignity Canada has a ton of that. We have some information on our website as well. Bridge C14, one of our partner organizations, offers education sessions on MAID if you're interested in diving into those as well, that can provide a little bit more information. So there's certainly information out there around MAID and what to expect. But if you suddenly find yourself in the situation of having somebody choosing this, it can feel a little bit abrupt and it can feel a little bit isolating, because it's just not quite that common yet. So reach out to any of us, any of these organizations for support. That's what we're here for, to talk through it, and give yourself a bit of a break. Treat yourself with grace. Just because you know in advance that something is happening, as we said, doesn't necessarily make it any easier. And if you're finding yourself reeling from this process, reach out and ask for some help.
Great. Thank you so much, Robin. So we're out of time for today. I did want to sort of piggyback off of something that you mentioned, Robin, which is some of the other groups that are working in this space, and you mentioned Bridge C14. As mentioned, this is part of a series of webinars that we're doing throughout the month of May, and we're going to have some of those other groups joining us throughout the month to speak to their organizations as well, and Bridge C14 is one of them. So please join us. We're meeting again next week, and if you haven't registered, please do so. I want to thank you so much, Robin and Sig, who had to jump off a couple minutes ago, for your time today. And to our audience, there were lots of wonderful questions coming through, and we really appreciate you asking those today. As always, we do have a post-webinar survey. It's going to pop up on your screen as soon as we wrap up. So if you can take a few minutes to fill that in for us, we would love to hear your feedback and any ideas that you have for future webinars that we could pursue. And as a reminder, webinars like this one and all of our compassionate services are provided free of charge to Canadians navigating end of life, their loved ones, and their healthcare providers. to enable us to continue providing these services, please consider making a charitable donation. And thank you again, Robin, for joining us today, and to everyone else. And we hope to see you at our next session. Take
Thank
care,
you so much
everybody.
for having us, and thanks to everybody for your questions.
No problem. Bye-bye.